Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Before School podcast. I'm your host Mark, also the animator of After School. Today we have an amazing guest, Dr. Chris Raynor. He's an orthopedic surgeon and a popular YouTuber. We are currently collaborating on an animation together about steroids, which is an absolutely fascinating rabbit hole to go down. By the time this podcast comes out, that should also be out. Anyways, I really enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Chris, and I hope you do too. Let's dive in. Dr. Chris, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
No worries, man. Thank you very much for having me, Mark. It's very cool to chat with you. As you can probably guess, I'm a very talkative kind of person, and I like having conversations with people. And I'm always I always love learning and teaching. So I'm very happy that you asked me to do this, and I'm happy that I could participate and learn from you, and then hopefully teach some people some things that I have in my little head here.
Well, that's amazing. I think we complement each other well because I'm not a big talker. My whole life, I've been accused of being quiet. So when people talk, I'm like, yes, thank God.
I would say, listen, man, you are extremely expressive. It's just that the way that your preferred mode of communication just happens to be visual, brother. That's it, man. You know what I mean? So I do not happen to have that gift that you do. So I have to use my words and my actions. And just as an aside, I have a brother, a younger brother. And my younger brother is also he's a visual artist, and he is very talented. But my brother is not. He is very. Interpersonal skills are not his thing per se, and he like when I see him, I don't see him that often, but when I see him, he has a book of stuff that he does, and some of his stuff he has put online, but most of it's in his books. And every time I see those books, I kind of I'm beside myself because I think it's almost criminal that somebody who has that kind of talent doesn't let people see it, man. That like it's criminal that somebody would have that and then it's hidden. And don't get me wrong, whatever he wants to do with it, it's his business. But I just think it's oh my, if I had that talent, I would be doing what you're doing and showing the world what I can do. And it's just I've tried to get him onto YouTube a few times, but it is what it is. He'll do what he wants to do, and he'll live the way he wants to live. But yeah, no, it's I think when you have the skill that you and he have, people need to see it, man. People need to see it because it's just amazing that people can do that.
Yeah, that is one of the great things about the day and age we live in is that social media has just given access to so many creators to unleash and share their talents with the world. And so I encourage every artist, I think it's like the golden age for artists to just, there's no harm in putting it out there and see what happens.
For sure, man. Think about this. Like in the past, right? You would create your works, whatever type of art they were. And then you would have to hope that you could have a patron, right? That would put your work in a gallery somewhere, right? And support you so that you could get it in front of eyes. And now, man, as you said, it's the golden age. That's been completely short-circuited. You could just make shit, put it up, and put it on Instagram. Bam, everybody sees it, right? And I think because of just like how the algorithms work, if you create quality content, it's eventually going to get seen, man. It's eventually going to get seen, and you're going to grow. So as you said, this is the golden age for people who have artistic talents. Put that stuff up online, man. And this and social media, although, there are some ills that are part and parcel of social media. Um, Social media has democratized the access to that kind of stuff, right? Because you don't need to have a patron. You do not have to have somebody behind you promoting that stuff. Not to say that doesn't hurt if you have it, but you don't need it. It's like you can and you see that not just with visual arts, but you see that with music and stuff. Like all of these rappers and artists that were found off of SoundCloud, right? They just did stuff in their bedroom and then they put it up, and then eventually enough people heard it, and then like it's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad that you decided to get on YouTube, because your content is the perfect marriage of education and entertainment. And I think your slogan on your channel is Medi Entertainment, right? Medical
Well,
entertainment.
as exactly it's edutainment, but the thing is, it's a connection. It's a marriage between those two things, right? Entertainment and education, because so I've done a few things in my past on my journey to becoming an orthopedic surgeon, and when one of the things that I did was I went to teachers college, and I had a teaching degree, and so I have always been a very chatty type of person, and I really enjoyed my experience when I was teaching and at teachers college, and um, I really like the idea of helping other people to understand something. And when but I always knew that I was going to be an or that I wanted to go into medicine, and so that part of my journey was relatively short. But when I finished, or when I entered into medicine, I still had an interest in teaching. And the thing that I understood, though, after starting to kind of do this, is that me standing in front of a blackboard or standing in front of the classroom and just reciting stuff, information that was in my head, that doesn't really work. And even though that was kind of the way that I was trained in school, and then when I became an orthopedic surgeon, that's the way that we were trained in our teaching sessions. I discovered that, yeah, that doesn't really work. And when I first started a medical education channel and started to kind of put that stuff out, you can quickly see in the metrics and the analytics that doesn't really work. And to be honest, I am, when I think about how I am myself, I am not that way anyway. I am pretty much what you see is what you get. And it's funny because people will comment on my videos and they'll say, oh, like you're putting on an act or whatever. That's not the way how you behave. You would behave as a professional. Like, bro, you don't understand. This is the way that I am with my patients. And part of it, part of it is just the way that I am, but part of it is also intentional, and I'll explain that. Both of my parents were factory workers. They're immigrants from Jamaica, very hardworking people, and they had grade 10 education. So they were not, I'm the first one in my family to go to university, and when my parents when my parents would go to see a physician, they're very old school mentality where like the physician would say something and they would go, oh, yes, right, okay. But they would never ask questions, right? Because like you don't ask questions of authority. That's very old school. And yet when they would leave, so they would leave with no questions. But of course, they had a million questions, right? And so then the first thing they would do, because I'm the one that went to university, is they'd ask me, hey, Chris, I went to the doctor's office and they said this. What does that mean? And is this a problem? And so at one point, I kind of made a promise to myself. Number one, to never have a patient leave my office and not have them understand something. So from a teaching perspective, I needed to be a teacher to my patients so that they could understand what I was talking about. And teaching doesn't just mean me regurgitating the words that I was trained in. Teaching means that I need to take this topic that I'm trying to communicate with them, and I need to break it down in such a manner that they can understand. So that may mean that I'm using completely non-medical terms to, broach this topic with them, or it may mean that I need to use a different kind of language other than, proper, correct English, grammar, all of that kind of stuff to get with them. So I kind of said, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to make it so that people understand what I'm saying, and so that's my goal. So that's part of it, and then also, I'm like, I'm I'm really a gym rat. I'm a football guy. I'm an ex football player, and I talk like I'm talking with my foot. Like, see here, I have no clinical responsibilities today. So what am I wearing? I'm wearing a t-shirt and sweats. This is what I would wear. And if I could do clinic in t-shirt and sweats, I would do it. But I have to be somewhat professional, so I wear a golf shirt, right? But the point being that when I'm hanging out with my friends, for my family, this is how I talk, right? And this is much more approachable than me talking about, the apex volar angulation of the distal radius fracture, and the radial inclination. People are like, what? What language are you talking? So I just like to break things down and make them as simple to understand as possible. And I think, I always say at the end of the video, see one, do one, teach one, because that's a common saying in medicine, common saying in surgery. But one of the things that I like about that, and it's not exactly that, but one of the things I like about that is that I the true goal, or no, the true measure of whether I understand a concept is not whether I can speak about that concept with other similarly trained surgeons and have them understand. Of course, they're going to understand. They have the same training that I do. But the true goal of whether I understand it and whether I truly know, what it means is my ability to take that concept, no matter how complex, and put it into a format that is easily accessible by anybody, right? Whether it's an adult with high school education, it's an adult without high school education, or it's a child, right? Like, that's every time I do one of these videos, that is one of my goals, is to try and take a complex thing and make it as easily digestible as possible. And I have to thank my team for some of that, because it's funny, when I first started the channel, my wife and I, she did a lot of the editing, and she would ask me questions, and then I would answer them, and I'd write a script and I'd do a video about it, and she'd say, dumb it down. You're not talking to surgeons. Dumb it down. And so then I would dumb it down, thinking I had dumbed it down. And then she's like, what are you talking about? I still not understand. And it's not to say that my wife's not intelligent. My wife is very smart. It's just that she has no medical training, right? And so words that I would just took for granted as, oh yeah, this, everybody understands this, everybody knows this. She's like, what are you talking about? People don't understand that. So it's great that I have my team around me, none of whom are medically trained. And they often can say, oh, geez, we need to make this simpler or whatever. And so that has been very helpful, because even sometimes, even when I'm trying to make it simpler, it still sometimes is not. And I have to kind of remember that the average level of comprehension in North America is like 6th grade, right? So I have to sort of bring things down a bit, but still, get all of the important information and explain something in a medically and scientifically accurate way, but make it understandable to a fifth grader, right? So
Yeah, that's why what you're doing is such a valuable service, because it seems like the people who are speaking our language on the fifth grade level may not really have the high level knowledge. So it's great that you're coming from this higher academic world and then communicating in a way we can understand. And I kind of look at what I'm doing in a similar way where like I try to draw the thing in the simplest way possible. So when you're talking about the brain sending signals to the testicles to then produce testosterone and estrogen, I'm trying to draw like a cute little brain figure that's throwing out signals and then testosterone's going throughout the body. But when I was looking up images to draw that, oh my God, it was so complex. Like just looking at a protein, I'm like, how am I going to even draw this? Like in a way that makes sense. So I made everything like a cute little character. And yeah.
But see, this is the thing, right? Like in medical school, we learn all of these complex processes, and it's like it's so hard to remember all of these things because they're so abstract, and we have no way of really appreciating what it looks like, and we're trying to put it. You were trying to wrap it around something in our brains to make it more understandable. Whereas when you do what you do, like it's way more memorable, man. Like even though it may not be 100% scientifically accurate to the process and how it looks, like if you were to look under an electron microscope or if you could see it at the molecular level, maybe it's not exactly accurate, but what you're doing is so much more memorable and relatable to the average person. And to be honest, like if I had, like I think about something like, say for example, the Krebs cycle, which is a system of metabolizing ATP, right? And how ATP is regenerated. It's an energy system. If you think about that, for example, and I think about all the steps of this process, which was just like, oh my God, I like it's so complex and hard to remember. But if I think, oh, you could draw that out, and instead of having it being exactly scientifically as we see it, you could draw it out with characters and create kind of a story arc of that. Like I go, that would be so much more memorable, right? And people would understand it. And for me, the one thing that I love is when I read comments and I have students, like high school students, college students, medical students, residents, say to me, oh, geez, I didn't understand this thing. I watched your video. Now I understand it. To me, that tells me two things. Number one, I'm on the right, I'm headed in the right direction. And then number two, that method of presenting information is much more digestible to a wider array of people than is our standard approach. And it's funny, in my in the city where I live, there are about 50 or 60 orthopedic surgeons. Okay. And when I went through I work in the city where I was trained. And when I went through my residency program, I had some medical issues concurrently. So my residency wasn't like the greatest residency. And I didn't have the greatest experience. And I didn't necessarily get along with all of my my educators, my preceptors. And also when I came to the program, I kind of came with a different viewpoint than a lot of my other colleagues in the same year or after me, in that when I arrived, I was a grown man. I had 3 university degrees. I had 3 children, not that were not young, they were sort of middle age, like, they're under the age of 12, but they weren't newborns type of thing. I was not a new parent. I had been a parent for quite some time. And I had also worked a little bit as a teacher. So I'm kind of coming at it with a different viewpoint, and I wasn't there to like be somebody's scut monkey. I was there to learn a craft, and I was kind of a little bit outspoken. And in hindsight, I was probably a little bit more outspoken than I should have been. But anyway, so when I came with a little bit of a different mindset, and I wanted to make it as best a learning environment as I could, but I didn't necessarily agree with how we were being some of the things, how we were being taught, and just the methods that they were using. And when I think about our medical preceptors, so the way that the education system works for medical trainees in general, but not always, in general, for most places, most academic programs, they hire physicians based on their area of expertise. And then, because the programs want to get money from the government or from grant agencies, they want you to produce research, right? So you have to be a researcher. And just because you are a medical specialist and a researcher doesn't necessarily mean you're a good teacher, right? Because those are different skill sets. And some of them happen to be good teachers, and others happen to not be. And so they weren't necessarily teaching us in a way that was optimal. They were teaching us in a way that they had learned. And I wanted to be able to teach people in a way that would aid their comprehension and aid their ability to, understand and assimilate that knowledge. So I just started to kind of change what I was doing based on that. And I'm in a community hospital now, so I don't really have a lot of residents and I don't have a lot of students, but they do come from time to time, and their experience they have with me is different than what they have with a lot of other people, because I just don't think that those ways of teaching the way that I was taught are as effective. And when I speak to my colleagues where I live now about what I do, most of them look at me doing my content on YouTube and they think it's silly. They think it's silly because, number one, I don't speak the way that an orthopedic surgeon would speak. They think it's silly because I'm not doing a didactic lecture about these particular topics, or about a specific topic, and going straight from A to Z on that topic. And they think it's silly because I'm not sort of in a suit, tie, or a lab coat, being super professional. But yet when I think about what they do, say, for example, you have a guy who is teaching in a program and he's teaching, there are 20 residents or 25, 30 residents in that program. So he'll get his message out to 30 residents, and then they'll disseminate that information to their patients. And you look at how many people that touched, and you say, oh, well, maybe that information will get out to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, right? Whereas you look at what you do, or you look at, so I only have a fraction of what you have, right? But I have 600, almost 700,000 subs now. I'll put out something on a particular topic, and like my last video that I did is really slow. And I think it's an important topic, but it's not really a sexy topic. It's kind of me standing on a little bit on a soapbox talking about screen time. That video did, in my last 10 videos, it's the poorest one, slowest one. It's only 15,000 subs or 15,000 views, right? That's my poorest one. And I went out, I communicated that message with 15,000 people on my poorest one, right? And then when you look at my last 10 videos, most of them are over 100,000, and I have one that's up to 400,000. That's kind of the average. And then if you look at my best video, which is 4.5 million, that's my message directly in an understandable, comprehensible manner to 4.3 million people. And I'm like, bro, on your best day, you can get your message out to a couple thousand, right? That's my worst day. And I'm like, if my goal is communication and my goal is education, I win. Hands down, I win, So I just think as a education tool, it's so much more effective, man. And although it doesn't give me the same kind of academic, kudos as my colleagues, I think it's way more effective.
That was all brilliantly said. And yeah, I think academia has a big problem right now, a big insecurity, because they spend millions and billions of dollars on research and studies, but then there's so little effort put into outreach to the community to communicate what they just researched. It goes in these peer-reviewed journals that I'm not reading and nobody that I know is reading. But then you have a TikToker whip their phone out and say 3 things and they reach 10 million people and they put no thought into it. There's no research behind it. So academia has a big communication issue right now.
For sure. And you see, this was like, I don't want to take this too far off the rails and get too political. But you saw this most recently with COVID, right? And particularly, so I'm Canadian, right? But I'm relatively aware of American politics. And I probably know more about American politics than I do about Canadian politics. And one example of this is, say, for example, you have somebody like, I did a video about Joe Rogan when Joe Rogan had COVID. And Joe, if Joe called me up and said, hey, you want to be on my show? Sure, I'd go on that show. But I would still want to call him out on what he had said during COVID. And he talked about how the vaccines were not extensively tested before they went out, and who knows what they were doing to people and all that kind of business. And he said, instead, I'm going to take ivermectin and I'm going to take monoclonal antibodies and whatever else he was doing. And, he has no real appreciation of the science behind what went into those vaccines and that whole process of determining the efficacy and the safety of that. And then also just the whole scientific process of looking at the results of that course of treatment when compared to others. He doesn't even understand truly the scientific process. And so he would talk about all this stuff, and he'd talk about bro science and what he was doing and what other people were saying on social media. But it's like, you can't really compare those two things. And people don't like something as simple as the weight of evidence, right? Like if you look at different types of studies and you look at level 1 through 5 studies, and for people who don't understand or don't know what that is, it's a hierarchy of studies, study design, and information that you can get from them that tells you what is the relative weight that you should apply to that evidence that comes from that study. And so there are different types of study, and you can have something which is a level 5 type of study, which is basically case reports, anecdotal evidence. That's level 5 is bro science, okay? Or level 5 is above bro science, but that's level 5. And then you can have different types of studies that you can create, such as a randomized, double-blind study, which is where people are randomly assigned to either a test group or to a control group, and then neither the tester nor the person knows what type of treatment they're going to get, because that's completely randomized. And that's level 3. Okay. And then you can have level 1, which is like huge number meta-analyses where they're looking at a whole bunch of results from a whole bunch of well-designed studies and aggregating all of that data together and then coming up. And clearly, like if you look at all those different types of studies, a level 1 study has, if you get an answer, it says, yes, this is, this vaccine or whatever is efficacious and it doesn't cause myocarditis or whatever, that is weighted much more heavily than level 3 evidence, which is weighted much more heavily than level 5 or bro science evidence. And people just don't get that, right? And people don't understand that. And that's something that people need to understand, that all information is not the same. And if I just go back to politics for a second, one of the things that became quite popular, a term over the last 8 years, is alternative facts, and every time I hear that, I cringe on the inside. I'm like that is just a phrase that people use when they want to be able to spew bullshit and not be checked on it. Because it's like, man, I every time somebody says that, I want to say, put your hand out on this table, right? And then when they put their hand out, I want to stab it, right, with a knife, and say, did I stab you with the knife or not? Right? Oh yes, you stabbed me. No. I didn't stab you. Your hand was touched in this manner by this type of object. This is alternate, like it's not alternative facts. The fact is I stabbed you, right? But just because I put a different spin on it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And so this is part of that whole kind of thing where people just like people need to have a better understanding of the scientific process. People need to have a better understanding of facts and opinions about facts. That's something different, right? That's not alternative facts. You have a different opinion than I do, or a different interpretation of the results, but facts are facts. So anyway, sorry to get off on a political tangent. So.
No, yeah, I mean, this could be a big rabbit hole that we go down, but I guess I'll just bring it back to the communication style. I think that the universities and the so-called experts were very heavy-handed in their communication style, saying, we are the authority, our word is infallible, and to even question us is to question science. And I think, like myself, I'm glad that we had institutions that created a vaccine. I'm glad we have medications and all this stuff. I don't think we should get rid of our institutions. But I think in many ways they have broken our trust. Do you see how like maybe the public could be very skeptical now of time and time again, we keep hearing about corruption or conflict of interest, or maybe this pharmaceutical company got very rich at the expense of, we look at the everyday landscape and people are pretty unhealthy and having a lot of issues. And then you're going to force this thing on us. And I think people definitely have a right to say, wait, let me have control over what I put into my own body. I think that's fair.
For sure. So I think that I can understand why people are skeptical. Although I do have to say there is a bit of again, a little bit of lack of understanding. And this can be partially blamed on just the media in general. And that is that, like, if you look at science and you look at the scientific method, the basis of the scientific method is skepticism, right? Like, I cannot say anything unless I have proof. And the null hypothesis is always that what I think is happening is not happening. That's the null hypothesis. And I have to prove by doing my research and by providing the results that this thing that I think happens a certain way is actually happening. That's the basis of science. And part of, when you want to bring back the idea of communication, the mainstream media likes to take things that science, like in science, we know that nothing is set in stone. We know that nothing is absolutely true. But we also recognize that some things are more true or more likely true based on empirical evidence and statistical chance. Some things are more true than others. So that we understand that in science, but we have not really communicated that well with the average population, and the media has not done that well, because every time we come with a breakthrough, the media will say this well, I'm just going to use this because we happen to be talking about on the topic of COVID. This vaccine stops COVID. That's what they'll say. When that is not what the science said, and it's not what the scientist or the physician said. What they said is that, well, within statistical chance, with a p-value of 0.005, meaning that 95 times out of 100, it's more likely that it's going to be this way, this virus or this vaccine will lower the chances of you acquiring COVID, or it will decrease the severity should you happen to get it, right? Like, that's what the science said, but that's a mouthful. And that you can't put that as a headline because nobody understands that. So what do they say? This vaccine stops COVID. Bang. And then, so that's a communication issue. And because of the whole urgency of the situation in this case, like, science and the scientists and the physicians look at it and go, oh man, should I call out the media for not saying exactly what I said or what the results said? Or is the urgency and the direness of this situation such that I cannot take that chance and I'll just run with it? Yeah, it stops COVID. Good enough. It's close enough, right? It's close enough to the truth that we'll get the desired effect, which is that most of the people will take it, and then we'll be able to stop this pandemic. So part of it is on the on the media for communicating in such sort of black and white, ironclad manner, a message that is not really black and white, right? And part of it is on us for just going along with it and saying, yes, that's what it was. But I also challenge people when, I understand that that's our bad and it's on the part of the media. I understand that. But I also challenge people and I go, oh, well, but give me another solution that you would have, when you're faced with this pandemic, faced with a virus that we know nothing about, we don't know what the effects are, we don't know how severe it's going to be, and initially the results go, oh shit, this is going to be bad. As a leader, if you were the leader of a country and you were faced with that decision, what are you going to do, bro? You know what I mean? I think that people did the best they could. You know what I mean? They were really scared. And the one thing about this, okay, this would have been completely different, okay, if this were something that you could see. In other words, COVID, how are you supposed to tell the difference between it and another flu? It doesn't cause any outward, there's no changes. You can't see it. There's no spots. There's no deformity. There's no nothing, right? So it didn't mean anything to some people because, for them, oh, it's just another cold. If if Okay, so one thing that's sort of coming a little bit, but it seemed to have slowed down, was the monkeypox right now, which is a version. It's like similar to smallpox, right? Which was very deadly. Um, if I always said to people, had it been if it had been a disease that was lethal and that you have purple spots and everybody could see it if you had it, right? And we didn't know how to do anything about it, this would have been the whole thing would have been completely different, because the moment that people were seeing, oh my God, look at, they got purple spots. Oh my God, there's purple spots. Everybody would have been, what do I need to take in order to not get the purple spots and die? Right? It just happened because it was something that was similar to a flu, and it had no outward thing that you could see. That I think that's part of the reason why there was some hesitance despite the messaging. But I do agree with you that I can see why people were hesitant, and I can see why the messaging, and I acknowledge that there was an issue that would make people not want to trust us. But that is not 100% on physicians and scientists. That's also on the media and how they portray what we say. Because headlines, going through and saying that whole, like if you look at a journal article, any journal article on any research topic, and you look at the title, none of that is sexy, and none of that, like, there's a reason why you're not reading those articles, man. And there's a reason why the general population is not reading that stuff, apart from the fact that it's hard to understand for people who have not been trained. But you look at the titles and you're like, what? Whereas it's much sexier, much easier, much more palatable, and consumable for people to have a 8-word headline. This stops COVID. Bang! Exclamation mark.
Yeah, our modern media landscape just makes everything so oversimplified, so polarized, black and white. And yeah, nothing is really that simple. And I wish that they had come out and said, look, we rushed this thing. Here it is. It's been shown to do this. You're free to take it if you want, but if you don't, that's on you. That you're an adult. You take your own risk. Here are the risks. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There are trade-offs to everything. Like, I don't know. I think they treated people like they were children more so. And
Sure.
most people are able to hold multiple ideas in their mind. They are able to weigh out risks. That we were told that this thing is completely risk-free. And we all know that there's unintended side effects to everything.
Sure.
You can't say that about anything. But I mean, I feel like we could probably talk about this for hours. but
For sure.
by the time this podcast comes out, our collaboration will be out on steroids.
Nice.
And that's how I discovered you, because I was looking across YouTube for the best content on steroids. And it was so refreshing to hear a doctor communicate in a way that I could understand. But it was high level educational content, but also high level entertainment. And so hopefully when people watch this, they'll also have watched our collaboration and they will have been very entertained. But I had some questions while creating our collaboration that I wanted to ask you.
For sure, man.
And I'm wondering, is there an optimal way to do steroids? Like, is there a time in your life, like an age, where it might be beneficial to take them?
Well, so let me go back to something you just said there as we were wrapping up about COVID. People need to be adults, and people need to understand that there are consequences to anything, right? And so steroids are no different. There are consequences. Our body is a very finely tuned machine, and over like hundreds of thousands of years, we have the body has developed processes to optimize its function. And our body works very hard to achieve homeostasis, to keep balance, right, between all systems so that they work optimally. And as soon as you introduce something exogenous, something from outside the body into the body, you are messing with that homeostasis. And although people might say, I will take this one steroid, that's all I'm going to take, I'm just going to take this one thing. There are so many intertwined systems that you adding that one exogenous thing may not just alter the system that you are hoping to address, but it may change a whole bunch of other interconnected systems. And so that is the first thing to understand, that it's never quite as simple as you saying, oh, I'm going to add this one thing and I'm only going to change this one system, because the body has a number of systems that it uses to communicate, one being neurological and two being endocrine. So neurologic is nerve impulses, right? Set signal from your brain, bang, goes down to a muscle, it goes down to an organ, bang, and some action occurs. But it also uses and that's kind of a direct communication, but it also uses an indirect system, which is endocrine, which is basically hormones that different organs will secrete, that will be circulated around your body, and then based on the hormone and the actual receptors that are present in different parts of the body, that those parts of the bodies will respond to that signal by taking some action. So you can do a localized thing through the nervous system, or you can do this generalized system through the endocrine. And so when you are taking it, you might affect the neuroendocrine system and multiple locations, even though your desired effect is only to do the muscles. So that's the first thing to think about. Now, that aside, if we're thinking, is there an optimal time? Well, I would say for anybody who was considering that, first of all, they should not do it when they're developing, because you may throw off the very fine balance between all of these systems that are trying to create your adult form based on the genetic template, the genetic message that was laid out in your DNA. And the moment that you add an extraneous signal to that, you will change that development. And so, yes, you might gain muscles, but one of the things that can occur, if you look at people who use steroids, they tend to look a little bit older than their stated age in many cases. And this is because you are basically telling your body to develop and to grow faster than it would normally do. And this can prematurely cause closure of your growth plates or the physes of the bone. So you could, if you were taking, when you were developing, depending on what steroids you're taking, what you're doing, you could prematurely close your growth plates, right? And you might make yourself shorter than you might otherwise have been. And likewise, if you were to take human growth hormone when you're in your developmental years, you might get bigger, but you might also cause changes in your facial structure. As a result of those hormones. And you look at somebody like Andre the Giant and people like that who basically grew to that size because of excess growth hormone, due to pituitary tumors. These are changes that you can do, which are non-reversible changes, right? So I would say, if you were going to do it, I would certainly not do it at a time when you are growing. So I would say teens is out. You should be fully developed adult before you do it. Then when you take steroids, anytime you take an exogenous steroid, because of your body's attempt to maintain homeostasis, it's saying, oh, well, I'm trying to maintain a particular level of testosterone or a hormone in the body. So since I have some extra from an exogenous source, I don't need to create it endogenously. I don't need to create it myself. So I'm going to tone down the internal creation or the internal, source. I'm going to lower that. And as a result, you could uh, inadvertently cause sterility, right? So um, if you stop taking it, or if you're taking it for a long period of time, and then you down regulate your endogenous or your internal creation of it, and then you start to have these secondary changes to your level of fertility, then it's like, oh, well, now I can't have children anymore. So that is another consideration. So if you are going to do it, you need to seriously consider, are you like, what's the time frame over which you want to do this? And are you interested in having children? Right. So I would also say I would probably wait until you had really met somebody who you plan to be with long term, and you had discussed that. Because if you did it when you were 20 and you did it for several years and then you became infertile, and then you met somebody when you're 25, this is the love of my life, and I would really love to have children with that person and have kids, but yet you can't because you're infertile. That's a problem, right? So that's another consideration. So I would say you should probably wait till after that. And then, uh, if we're thinking about later, after you've kind of figured out what you're going to do with kids, or maybe you've had kids and you're thinking about you want to take it, you then also have to decide, so are you willing to live with the potential side effects that occur with it? Yeah, you could be jacked, you could be really strong, really fast, whatever. But then are you at a point in your life where you can deal with the additional side effects, say, such as cardiomegaly, right? Your heart is a muscle, just the same as are any of your other muscles. And it is a muscle that is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. And so, it always amazes me when I do videos, and gym bros don't, they go, oh, your heart's going to be fine. And why they don't understand why there are significant cardiovascular effects from steroids. Because I'm like, there's only one muscle in your body that's working all the time, and it's your heart. And so if it's moving all the time and training all the time, it should make sense to you that if you take steroids, that as a muscle, that's the muscle that's going to be one of the ones that's most affected. But to get back to what I was saying, you have to sort of think, oh, can I deal with these other issues, or am I at a place, am I healthy enough at this point that I can deal with this? Because these are serious issues. And so these are all things that you should be thinking about. And then the last issue that I think is important is that depending on when you take it, so say you're not taking it as a teen, you're not taking it when you're young in your 20s before you have kids. So now you're after kids. So then you have to think, well, why am I taking it? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? Like if I'm in my 30s now, am I still trying to be a professional athlete, or am like, what is the purpose of doing this? And if I take it now, and even say I'm taking it and I've done all of the, I'm taking it with this under the supervision of a physician, and then I'm doing all of the blood work, I'm doing all of the monitoring that goes along with it so that I can do it as safely as is possible. Then it's like, well, what am I trying to achieve? Am I just trying to look good, or am I trying to perform a certain function in my day-to-day life? And if so, do I then need to take this for life, or take it indefinitely? And then once you take it for a long period of time, you're committed to taking it for life anyway, right? Because once you take it long enough, you've downregulated your endogenous internal production to a point where it never comes back. And so if you get off it, then now you are you have low levels, right? And you're not functioning normally. So then you are committed to taking it for life. So these are all of the things that you have to consider. And I think when you consider those things, the window of opportunity where it's probably going to provide the most optimal results with the least amount of side effects is probably pretty narrow, pretty small. And then I'm not sure that the ends justify the means.
That was a beautiful answer. And I guess just in my own experience, what I see with my own eyes in my gym is I see quite a few older guys, maybe in their 60s, that openly tell me that they do them. But they do really impressive things. Like some of them are doing 20 plus pull-ups. And it's got me thinking like, okay, like you're saying, I still want to have a family. There's still a ton of things I want to do. I definitely don't feel like I need them, but it got me thinking, all right, if I am at a point in my life where I'm okay with doing them for the rest of my life, I'll probably be pretty old. Maybe start when I'm 70 and just do them till I'm 80, but live those last 10 years like pretty well.
I, you know, so I'm 54. I'm gonna be 55 soon. And I was a relatively high level athlete. When I was younger, I played football at my university, and I was drafted in the CFL, which is Canadians' version of the NFL. Um, and then after I left football, I was a fitness instructor, fitness trainer for many years. I did that concurrently going through school, through medicine, and I even did it partway through residency. So I've always been relatively active. And I look at myself and I think, and I look at some of these people and think, like, man, I love being jacked. I love the way I feel when I lift a lot of weight, and I love being able to lift more weight than other people. But as I get older, I have to sort of, I have to say to myself, like, what exactly am I, what is my goal here? You know what I mean? Like, even at 50, I would say, like, if I look at myself objectively right now, and compare myself to the shape that I have been in at other times in my life, I would say I'm out of shape. Like, I know I'm out of shape, right? I'm a little bit overweight. And don't get me wrong, like, most people would say you're not overweight, but compared to what I think I should be and what I would like to be and what I've seen myself in the past, I go, oh yeah, man, you're overweight. I'm flabbier than I was before. I'm not as ripped as I was in the past. And I think I like being that way. I like being ripped. I like being jacked. And I'm not gonna lie, I've thought about TRT and whatnot. But if I objectively look at the situation and I compare myself to other 54-year-olds, right? Man, I'm probably in the top 10% of people my age, right? If not, maybe the top 5% of people my age, in terms of overall fitness and body appearance. So then I'm like, well, like, am I trying to compete with 20-year-olds? You know what I mean? Like, we get older, because that's a natural part of living. That's the natural part of the life cycle. We're not meant to be 20 forever. We're not meant to function like we're 20 forever. And if I take my ego out of it and I go, geez, man, you know what? Like, I'm fitter than most people my age. I could do more than most people my age. I can lift more than most people my age. And sure, there are people who are stronger than me. They can do more than me. But am I trying to be a Navy SEAL? You know what I mean? Am I trying to be a trained assassin, or am I trying to be an MMA fighter? I'm not trying to do those things. I'm just trying to, my goal at this point, is different. And when I was younger, trying to be a professional athlete, my goal was bigger, faster, stronger, and crush people as much as possible. That was my goal, right? I was a defensive back and I wanted to smoke everybody. But now, my goal is I want to be self-sufficient. I want to be able to be active for as long as I can. If I can be active till the day I die, till I'm 80, 85, then that's amazing. I want to be in shape enough that, I'm getting to the age now, my kids are old enough that I'll be a grandparent soon. I want to be the cool grandparent, man. I want to be the one that can play football with his grandkids and run with his grandkids, or play basketball, or go skiing, water skiing, diving, you name it. I want to be able to. I don't want to be the guy who's using the cane, sitting, oh, geez, oh, guys, just go on and play without me, I want to be the guy that can do stuff with my family, and I want to be the guy who is self-sufficient. So I think with that mindset, I now think differently about training. And in addition, I also am training because of that, I'm also training for longevity, right? With a lot of the stuff that I did before, I'm trying to lift as much as I can, be as jacked as I can. It was bigger, faster, stronger, because the guy across the field from me is doing that as well. And if I'm not working harder at bigger, faster, stronger, I'm going to get run over by him. And that's not going to do well, because our team is going to lose. I'm going to look crappy on TV, and that's going to suck. So I'm going to train harder so that I can be bigger, faster, stronger, so that when we two collide, I can crush him. But the thing is, bigger, faster, stronger is not commensurate with longevity, and it's not necessarily the same as what's best for you as an organism, what's best for your body, and what's the most healthy, right? Like, that's different. And so now, yes, I want to be big, fast, and strong, but I also want to be mobile. I want to be able to move my body through space fluently, and I want to be able to do all kinds of movements, and not just a select few movements. And I also want to make sure that when I train and do stuff, I do it in a way that's healthy for my joints, healthy for my heart, healthy for all of my body systems. So that I have to keep that in mind. And so with that, I go, what's the point, man? Like, why would I've thought about it, and then every time I think about it, I'm like, nah. And this is gonna sound funny, but one of the things I thought about most recently when I was thinking about this, right? Like, if I take TRT, like, I could be more jacked, I could look better, it'd be awesome. My social media would be even that much better, because I could take my shirt off, and, bro, look at me. But I think, oh, what happens in the zombie apocalypse? What happens in the zombie, like, because if you have to take it, and you are now taking it for life, you're committed to taking it for life because you've taken it regularly long term. What happens in the zombie apocalypse when you cannot no longer gain access to it? It's not available.
You're
right?
just going to become a weak zombie. You're just going to have to be, yeah.
So I'll just stay natural, and I will just, I will be happy with being stronger than 95% of the other people. It's funny. I saw a video last night. I can't remember what it was from, but they were talking about people getting chased and caught. And the one character said, I don't need to be faster than everybody. I just need to be faster than the slowest person. Right. So if I'm in better shape than most of the people my age, I don't need to be stronger or faster than everybody. I just need to be stronger and faster than the slowest people. And I'm good.
There you go. I think, yeah, we keep bringing up this idea of comparison, though. And that's, at an advanced age, it's pointless to compare yourself to who you were when you were 20 or other 20-year-olds.
Yes.
But a lot of this steroid use and testosterone, and it's intermingled deeply with social media. And now we put such an emphasis on social media that it's like who we are online is more important than the real world. So I'm seeing people in the real world doing these things that make no sense, but it's all to enhance their performance of who they are online. And yeah, I love how you cover a lot of these really extreme things that people are doing in the real world to boost their online persona or profile. And it seems like the substances that people are getting involved with are getting stronger and stronger and stronger in almost every realm. Are you noticing the potency of things just getting higher and higher?
For sure, man. So, we're talking about we're talking about steroids here, for example. And before, they used to have only a few steroids, but now, with modern science and chemistry, people they've been able to create a much wider range, right? And as it mentioned earlier, steroids, there are positive effects, but then there are negative effects, right? And so people will play around with the steroids to get more of the positive with less of the negatives. And so this is how SARMs sort of came into play, right? Because they're trying to do these, they're trying to selectively upregulate a particular type of receptor, which is going to give you more muscle, but not, upregulate other receptors that might be normally concurrently upregulated by a steroid, right? So if you take a pill, SARM, you can isolate effect to this one type of receptor here and just get the muscle benefits of it. So, so you have that coming into play, but also because, say, for example, with bodybuilders who, if you're going to be a professional bodybuilder in an open class and be competitive, it's just part of the process. You have to take steroids, right, in order to gain the size. So if you're going to do that, like, so you and I are both competing as bodybuilders, and we're both taking steroids. Well, what's the difference, right? Like, and we're both training hard in the gym. Well, if I can have more money and I can get somebody who has created a more potent version of this, then that potentially will have more benefit for me, right? So you have this arms race between the different types of steroid compounds, or SARMs compounds, to between creators, or between labs, to see who can create the more potent version of this compound, so that they can tell people, well, our version is better than this version over here because it's way more potent. You'll have better effects. So that's very true with, for example, steroids, but it's also true in regular pharmaceuticals. So if you consider something, for example, like Ozempic and Wegovy, right? Like, so you have these GLP-1 modulators, and you have these chemicals that mimic hormones that are in your body, and they are compounds that help you make your brain think that you are full, right? And they slow down the process of digestion. So there are multiple GLP-1 modulator compounds made by different companies, and each company wants to make money. So they want their compound to be more effective than their competitor, right? So they're all trying to do, through chemical manipulation, they're trying to change the chemical structure of these compounds in just such a way so that you can optimize the desired effect that you want. So weight loss, appetite suppression, and digestive processing speed. You can optimize all of these functions, but at the same time decrease all of the negative side effects. So they're competing with other companies and in trying to increase the efficacy, but they're also competing with themselves, because it's like, oh, well, if I did this compound, Ozempic 1.0, and I can make it more effective, and I can sell you Ozempic 2.0. Hey guys, I'm going to sell you Wegovy, right? Which is basically the same thing. They just increase the dosage to make it more effective. Then we can sell it at a premium and make more money. So there's an arms race there as well. But we can go even from that and go to illicit drugs. And it's the same thing. There is an arms race there. I watched a video recently where they were talking about the strength of THC in marijuana, and they were looking at how over the last 2 decades the strength of it has increased substantially because there are better ways to refine it now, and now that they have edibles, right? You forget having to go through the hassle of smoking a joint, right? I can now just get the chemical, I can extract the THC, and then I can concentrate it. And my company's doing that, and your company's doing that, and I want to compete against you, and I want people to come to me and buy my stuff. So I better make sure that my stuff is the most potent. And I just recall them saying in this video where currently, if you look at the amount of THC that were present in typical strains of marijuana like 20 years ago, and now through selective cultivation and breeding of the different strains, they look at the average amount of THC and compare it to strains from 20 years ago. It's like something like 8 to 10 times higher now than it was back then. And so just imagine yourself, um, people would smoke a joint like 2 decades ago and they'd get high. And now the average one joint is like them smoking 10 joints 20 years ago. And like you think, who's going to smoke 20 joints in a row? Right. And like that's the average, what is present, the average concentration of THC that is present in plants now. And likewise, when people are consuming edibles, again, because they want to, they're taking THC from these strains from today. So they, obviously it's more concentrated, higher levels than what it was previously. But in addition to that, they want to make their THC or their edible as have the most profound effect that they can for the user, so that people will want to buy their stuff again rather than somebody else's. So they're again playing with it to make it higher in concentration. So yes, I have noticed this, and it is widespread across many different sort of fields and many different types of compounds. From medicinal to illicit, it's there across the board.
Yeah, I just saw a recent video, or I started it, on nitazene you did, and I was shocked. I never heard of it, and I thought that fentanyl was extremely strong. Compared to other opioids, isn't it like 100 times stronger?
It's about it's about 100 to 1,000 times, right? So the
Wow.
typical dose, say for example, typical pain relieving dose of hydromorphone, which is a type of morphine, we might give as a standard dose 5 milligrams of morphine, and we would give that intravenously, and that would last you maybe 4 to 6 hours. The corresponding dose of hydromorphone, which is about 10 times as strong as morphine, would be sort of 1 milligram or half a milligram. And again, that would last you about 4 hours. Whereas the dose that you would give somebody of fentanyl would be like 10 to 20, or maybe if it's really bad pain, 50 micrograms of fentanyl, which is a microgram is a millionth of a gram. Okay. So just again, so people understand, 5 to 10 milligrams of morphine, 0.5 to 1 milligram of dilaudid, or 15 to 20 or maybe 50 micrograms, 50 millionths of a gram of fentanyl. So that's strong. And nitazenes are 10 times to 1,000 times stronger than fentanyl. And the thing that was interesting, so they were trying to come up with more potent analgesic medication. So that their chemists are always doing this, and they're trying to create compounds that are more powerful but have less side effects. So they're always experimenting and trying these things. But nitazines ended up being so powerful that they said, we can't use this. Like this, we just can't use this. And so they stopped researching this and stopped putting this out there. But, the information was still available. And once some people who were entrepreneurial minded and who knew a little bit about chemistry discovered that the compound was out there, they're like, hey, we can start making this and selling this to people. The downside is that, like, this is super, super powerful, and potentially we can create something that might kill people. But the people who are making it and selling it, they don't really care whether a person or two or three or 100 die because they use it, because they know that there'll be other people who are looking for illicit drugs, who are always trying to get a better high, and they will buy it, right? Because part of the thing is with opioid dependency or drug abuse is that you build up a tolerance to it, right? And so and you have people always kind of chasing that first high. The first high is like, oh, the greatest for them, but then everyone after that, because you start to build a tolerance, is less, and so then you need to take more to get there, right? And so you're always looking for stuff that's more potent. And it's this fine line between, is it going to be potent enough to give me a better high, or the high that I'm looking for? Or is it going to be too much and I'm going to die? So, people have to worry about that. And nitazines are certainly a scary thing. I talked about that video and how it was, I think the place where kind of first reared its head was in the Tenderloin district in the United States. But I've recently seen some stuff on Reddit that it's now like, I live, as I said earlier, I live in Canada. I live in Ottawa. It's a city of 1 million. It's a relatively, it's a big city with a small town feel to it. But we have our own drug problem here. But now it's made its way here. And people have started reporting that nitazines are here. And certainly if I'm driving around, I don't tend to go downtown that frequently, just because I don't have any purpose for doing that. But in times when I have driven around in those areas, or I've now started to see people who sort of have that appearance of what people look like in the video that I posted. So yeah, it's a scary thing.
Do you know Dr. Carl Hart?
No, I don't.
I just had him. He's a Columbia professor. He's a very big, well-known drug advocate. He's for decriminalizing everything. And I just had him on the podcast about 2 weeks ago. And we discussed this very issue. And his stance is that we need really good testing so any user knows what's in it. Because most of the deaths and issues happen when you think you're smoking something and then there's that small amount of fentanyl in there that you don't know is in there. And that's what gets you in all the trouble. Which he's totally right about that. But I did ask him, I'm like, are you concerned that things are just getting so strong that it's just kind of the way the market forces push things? The
Very
incentives of like a capitalistic structure, your best customer is somebody who's an addict. If you create a product that just cures somebody in one-time use, that's not a very good product. Or, it's a great product for the customer, but in terms of continued revenue stream, not that great. And vice versa. If you create something that kills your customer, that's also terrible. So it's like the people that produce products in almost every domain now are trying to find that perfect balance of like, let's keep this customer coming back, from social media to the food we eat to the drugs. how do we create the perfect addict that is always going to be dependent upon our product? So sadly, that is what the market forces are incentivizing. And so
Mhm.
you kind of see it everywhere.
For sure you can. I just had this conversation. Um, I had this conversation with my son and my wife yesterday because yesterday I was in the operating room and I was doing something called the trauma room. So the trauma room is a relatively newish thing that we've been doing for sort of the last 5 to 10 years, where um, in the past, when a trauma case came in, they would call us and we would operate on it right away. So if it came in at 2 o'clock in the night, um, they would call you in and the surgeon would get up, go in, and he would operate on it. But these days, everybody wants to have a better lifestyle, right? And pay surgeons don't want to be killing themselves by getting up in odd hours of the night all the time. So we have this thing now which is called the trauma room, which basically you'd have when a case comes in, if it's not limb or life threatening, it will be admitted. A hospitalist will look after that patient. And then during daytime hours, when you are well rested, when everybody's there, you have the maximum amount of support available, you'll operate on that case. So I had the trauma room yesterday at my hospital. And so I did 2 small cases. And then I did the last case that I did was an ankle fracture. And it was an ankle fracture on a 24-year-old man. And he was 24, but he looked like he was about 44. And this guy looked pretty rough. And when I asked him, I didn't ask all of his medical history. I asked him, how he had injured himself. He had been struck by a car. But I noticed on his x-rays that he had previous fixation further up that leg from a previous injury. And I asked him, oh, well, I see that you have had additional fixation before because you broke your leg. What happened then? Oh, well, I was run over by a car. And then I was like, okay. And then I just kind of asked a few other questions that I needed to ask. And then I went about my business. Then maybe about 10 minutes later, as we were setting up, so I go down to the operating room to get the nurses, to get all the appropriate equipment for this fracture, because I've seen the patient. I know what type of fracture I need, know what type of equipment I need. So the anesthetist in the meantime, he has gone to see this patient. And then, so he's gotten more medical history from the patient. And he wants to know more about, obviously he wants to know if he has any medical illnesses, but he also wants to know about consumption, what this guy does, what he takes, and all that kind of stuff, because that's going to play a role when it comes to how he's going to administer his anesthetic and what drugs he's going to use. So he comes back and he says that this guy smokes about 5 grams of marijuana per day, which is a substantially large amount, right? And I'm sure there are people who smoke way more, but 5 grams a day is a lot. And he says, but in addition to that, he also smokes, and I can't remember exactly how much, but it's a crap ton. He also smokes a crap ton of crystal meth every day, right? And I was like, oh my God. Now when I think back to why this guy has been hit by a car twice or run over by a car, then it to me, it starts to make sense now, because I just think he's probably put himself in crappy situations. So anyway, when I came home last night, I got home a little bit late, and I was just saying to, my wife and son were saying, oh, how come you're late? What were you doing? I said, oh, I was operating on this guy, blah, blah, blah. And so then we got into this big conversation about, well, what? And I said, it's a shame, because this guy is 24 years old. I said, he looks like he's 44, but internally he's probably 84 because of how hard his body has lived during this experience of addiction that this guy has. And And my son was like, well, are you blaming this guy? And I'm so like, no, I'm not blaming him. It's like, obviously he's had some kind of trauma in his life, and he's trying to deal with it as best that he can. Right. But unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be doing that well with how he's dealing with it. And his chosen path to deal with the trauma doesn't seem to be doing that well for him mentally or physically. And so, um, when I consider that kind of situation, and I think about, you mentioned Dr. Harp saying how all of this stuff needs to be um, legalized, or should be decriminalized. I agree with him that we should certainly have better testing, because we're like, for example, right now we're working on a script for pink cocaine. And so that'll be a video that's coming out soon. And the interesting thing about pink cocaine is that it's never really the same. It's like everybody has their own recipe. It just looks the same, but it could have ketamine, nitazene, it can have fentanyl, it can have morphine, it can have a whole bunch of different things in it, depending on who made it, right? And even if you have the same guy make it, depending on what he has available at the time, each batch may be different, right? So it is important for people to have testing so that they have the right, or so that they know what they're getting. But there is still a drive for them to satisfy the urge that is calling to them from inside. And so even if you had people test, right? I'm sure that there are some people that go, oh my God, there's fentanyl in this one. There's fentanyl in this batch. But I don't have any other drugs available to me right now. And if I don't take something right now, I'm going to get into withdrawal. I'm going to go into withdrawal. I need to take something. And so I know there's fentanyl in this because I tested it, but I'm going to take it anyway. Right. And so I think, yes, we need to have the testing, but there is a part of me that says people are so, there are some people that are so far gone, or they are so desperate that they might take that and still not, or they might see the testing and still take it anyway, right? Or the hole that is inside of them is so deep, they feel so badly about themselves or the world or whatever, that they just may say, screw it, I'm taking it anyway. I don't care. I'm still taking it. So I get the thing about decriminalization, but you just need to look at places like the Tenderloin District, or, for example, in Canada, out in Vancouver, they have a place called Hastings Street. And I hadn't been to Vancouver until the last couple of years. And I went there to teach a course for the military, on a trauma course. And so, as we're walking out, I just wanted to see, because I hadn't been there before. And it's scary, man, to see it. Well, no, I shouldn't say scary. Scary is not the right word. I don't want to make people, although it could be frightening if you were a female or a small person or whatever. But it's shocking and jarring to walk and down the street and see people just using in the middle of the street, and to see the condition that they will allow, like, these people who have been taking it, see how vulnerable they are after they've been taking these drugs, right? Because they're completely stoned. They're completely oblivious to the world around them. And to see that, and to know, like, what level of pain, what level of, what level of discomfort must you be suffering that you would willingly put yourself into that position in public and have everybody see you, and know that the disdain that people would look at you with when you are like that, but yet you would do it anyway. Like, I think, because in the end, nobody really wants to do anything that hurts themselves, right? Nobody wants to do anything that is bad for themselves or makes them feel bad, but yet people do it anyway. So like that, if they do that, what is obviously that drive is more than their drive for, or their their drive for um sort of affection from the greater population or acceptance from the greater population. So I agree on the part that yes, we need testing, but I don't know that if we just said across the board it was all decriminalized, like I don't know if that's the solution. I think it would certainly allow researchers a better opportunity to research the effects of these medications so that we could have a better understanding. But that I don't know that that gets to the step of, well, all these people who have suffered trauma and who are trying to address the trauma, how are we fixing that? You know?
Mm. Yeah, well said. I'm from San Francisco, not far away from the Tenderloin, and so it's always been a rough neighborhood. But I do think I've seen firsthand that the drugs seem to be getting much stronger, whereas 30 years ago that area had people smoking weed that wasn't even that potent, and now it's got people that look like they couldn't come back from their situation. Like they're beyond a certain point where it is very shocking to see. And yeah, there's a whole section of the city that is kind of like a no-fly zone for small businesses and kids, and it's gotten to a pretty rough point. But I did want to ask you one other thing that I wanted to ask you about stem cells.
Yes.
My transitions between topics are not very good. I'm just like, um,
We're here to
well,
talk about whatever you want, man. It's all
yeah,
good.
yeah. But I did want to sneak this in before you had to go.
Sure.
Yeah. What is your opinion on stem cells? Are those, if I had an injury in my ankle that was persisting for a long time, could that be the get out of jail free card? Or
So, this goes back, that question goes back a little bit to communication and talking about communication, um, with, scientists and physicians, which we've established we're not that good at. And then the media, which is really good at communication, but they're not really good at getting the message accurate. Right. And so stem cells, um, in an ideal world, stem cells are pluripotent cells, meaning that they can change into a whole bunch of different things. And they're not just a specialized cell with one function. And they can perform a lot of different functions consequently. And so you can put them into a place where you have potentially damage or whatever, and they might be able to transform into a bunch of different cell types that could provide multiple functions there. And so that's ideally what would happen, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And they are not the panacea that the media or bro science says they are. And so if you look at the results of stem cells and you compare that to, say, the results of something like platelet-rich plasma, PRP, the results of stem cells, so getting blood and taking all of, sorry, getting, well, you can get it from a number of different places, but so you could take it from the umbilical cords of like placenta. You can take it from there, or you can take it. There are now processes where you can take differentiated cells, treat them chemically, and have them return to an undifferentiated state, so you can get it from there. But at any rate, regardless of the source, so you can, if you look at studies that compare injuries or issues, various issues treated with stem cells, and you compare it to PRP, there's no significant difference between the two. So PRP is where you take platelet-rich plasma. So you take red blood, you put it in a centrifuge, you spin it down, and you separate out the red blood cells from the plasma, from the layer which contains all of the things like platelets and other growth or other factors, whether it's growth factors, hormonal factors that are present. And when you spin it in a centrifuge, those three things separate. And so then if you take off that layer that contains the platelets and all of these other compounds, there potentially are healing hormones or healing factors, enzymes, and other types of compounds that are present there that can help with healing. So when you compare those two things to each other, there's not a significant difference. And in fact, when you compare stem cells to PRP and then just to cortisone, which is a corticosteroid that which is created artificially, which you can inject in, which has immune modulating effects, there's not any significant difference between the three. But where the difference, what is statistically different, is the price, right? Because you can inject cortisone and it costs you $50. You can inject PRP and it costs you $600. Or you can inject stem cells and it costs you $5,000, right? So we understand what is the ideal mechanism by which stem cells might work, but we really haven't figured out how to make that theory a reality. And so, I see videos on time and I see lots of influencers. Oh, Joe Rogan swears by it. Ronnie Coleman, I did videos on Ronnie Coleman and he goes and gets injections all the time, blah, blah, blah. And it helps. Like, if it were to help, why is Ronnie Coleman still walking with crutches and still unable to stand? I do a lot of videos on chiropractors, and one of the chiropractors I did a video on was on Bo Hightower, who's the guy who uses the hammer to chisel people or whatever. And
he literally uses a hammer.
He uses this a mallet, and he uses this device. And he basically puts the device on the vertebrae he wants to adjust, and then he tap, 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 tap. And it's like, this is like these are circus acts, man. Like that doesn't do anything, but it's a good gimmick, and people swear by it because they see it. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's doing something, even though placebo effect is 30% effective. But anyway, I watched a video where he was talking. I can't remember whether he had a biceps rupture or a pec rupture, because he was working out and he ruptured a tendon. So he went down to somewhere in in the Central Americas.
Was it Panama?
Well, maybe it was Panama,
because that's where most people go for the stem cells.
He went to this clinic and got this stem cells. And like, again, this just shows to me people have a complete lack of understanding. And this guy is a chiropractor, so he should have an understanding of anatomy and stuff. But it's like, bro, like, it just shows me you have a complete lack of understanding of anatomy. And that there are some things, for example, like if you had a hamstring muscle tear in the belly of the muscle, okay, and where the bulk of the muscle is contiguous, meaning it's touching each other, and you have only a portion of the fibers have been ripped. If you had that kind of setting, you might say to me, oh, well, I injected it with PRP, I injected it with stem cells, and I achieved some benefit. And I would say, okay, you might get some marginal benefit, because when you have that tear where the bulk of the muscle is still intact, you're going to have a defect. And in that defect, you're going to get hematoma. And then if you inject into that, you have this gel, a blood clot, where you're going to have some local activity from that, from the PRP or the stem cells, which might help to increase healing a little bit, because you've injected it locally. injected it into a thing that is going to stay there, not be disseminated through the body, and you might get some marginal benefit from that. But when you rupture a muscle, when you rupture a tendon, you pull the tendon off the bone, that is I don't care what you inject. That is a mechanical structural problem. I say this to people all the time. For example, with rotator cuff tears, people come to me and they say, can you fix my rotator cuff? And they go, I did physio, I did chiro, I did massage, I did injections of cortisone, I did injections of HA, none of it worked. And I said, well, listen, if we were sitting in your living room, right, and you ended up, there was a big gust of wind and it blew the shingles off the corner of your house and the sheathing off the corner of your house in the corner. So when we're sitting in the living room, I look up and I can see the sky through that hole. That's a structural mechanical problem. And I don't care. You can come inside. You can put new carpet down. You can paint the walls. You can put wallpaper up. You can hang pictures. You can do all of those things. But when it rains, because I'm looking up and there's a hole in the ceiling, your floor is going to get wet, right? So when you tear tendons and stuff like that, structural problem, man. Structural problem. I don't care what you throw at it. It is not going to take that tendon, which is over here, and it should be over here, and move it back to over here and reattach to the bone. Not going to happen. So sometimes you have structural problems, and for structural problems, this stuff is just not going to work. It might provide, as I said, marginal benefits to other problems. Like you can see that for, there are some studies that show that, say, for example, PRP or stem cell use, if you have a low-grade partial thickness rotator cuff tear, right, where the bulk of the tendon is intact and there's a small partial thickness tear through part of the tendon, and you inject PRP or stem cells into that there is a marginal benefit to healing, the pace of healing, and the integrity of the tendon, marginal. But as I said before, if you compare PRP to stem cells, there's no statistical difference between the two. And maybe we've just not studied it in large enough numbers, but that would just mean that even if there was a difference, that it's marginally small. So there's not a significant difference between the two. And so PRP, from my point of view, stem cells is just really expensive PRP, and even PRP is not really that effective. So it's like, in my practice, I have a community practice. Half of my patients, I practice in a community hospital outside of Ottawa, but half my patients come from Ottawa. So Ottawa is a very white collar government town, so lots of educated people. And then the town or the city where my hospital is a smaller kind of rural community or semi-rural community. So a lot of blue collar workers. So I have patients from Ottawa, they have money, they have drug plans, and they'll purchase stuff like that. Patients in Cornwall won't, because they don't have the funds, they don't have the drug plan. So I don't really push these things. I certainly never push stem cells, because I just don't think it's that effective, and it's not worth the cost. And then PRP, I'll do it, but I don't push it on people, or I don't really mention it unless they request it. But again, because cost in general, and I think that the results are only marginal. So if you had endless amounts of money and you want to try everything, sure, let's do it. But otherwise, nah.
That was a fantastic answer. Literally right before this, I saw my friend in the gym who's about 60 years old, and takes a lot of stuff. And he had a knee issue, and he's like, "Oh, I just injected it last night with peptides, and it feels great today." What is I don't even know what is a peptide.
So a peptide can be a bunch of different things, but by definition, a peptide is a chain of amino acids. So it is either a protein or a portion of a protein, the active component of a protein, that can be used to do a specific action. And so there are a number of different peptides. I think one of the most common ones, most famous ones is BPC-157. And basically, they are components of proteins that will do a specific task. So proteins are the workhorses within the cells of the body that do different things. And we have proteins that create muscles, but we also have proteins that create enzymes that carry out actions and do specific things, including cell repair, or cellular transport, transporting other proteins or compounds that we might ingest or eat from one location to another. So peptides have sort of become a little bit more mainstream because we have researchers who are looking at chemicals that can help to promote healing, and either increase the rate of metabolism of certain processes, such as, for example, bone growth, tendon growth, or tendon healing, to speed up those processes, or to just start processes in an area where they might not otherwise occur. And so the fitness community has kind of latched onto these chemicals because they can now take them and potentially reap the benefits of having those proteins or those enzymes function in a particular location without their own bodies having to create them. Or if their bodies do create them, to be able to upsize or supersize the amount of compound that is present in your body so that you can maximize healing potential. So this is sort of what those peptides are and what they do. And just as there are different proteins and different enzymes in your body that all have different processes, there are different peptides that can be created, because these are generally created artificially. So they can be created to do different tasks and also to change their properties. So some proteins are only water soluble, meaning they dissolve in water, or some can only be dissolved in oils or fats. So you can engineer these peptides so that you can change either their properties or their ability, the ways in which they are disseminated. And so through experimentation, you can either add amino acids or take off amino acids to change the structure. And the sequence of these peptides is related to their structure. And that is because all proteins in the body are basically sequences of amino acids that have been pre-arranged by DNA sequences. But the thing is, when you have these machines in the body called ribosomes, which basically take so DNA. You have a message in DNA. It's transcribed into RNA, which is basically a photocopy is made that can then be read by a machine. The machine is the ribosome. The ribosome reads the photocopy of the message. It then builds something, a sequence of amino acids based on what is the blueprint in that photocopy. Okay, so RNA is the photocopy, DNA is the original message, and the ribosome is the photocopier, or not photocopier. It's like the 3D printer, which is taking the plans and making something, and it makes a string of amino acids. But the amino acids doesn't come out just as a string. It comes out as a string, and then based on chemistry between each of the individual bases in it, each of the individual amino acids, that string bends into different shapes. And it's the shapes that interact with receptors in our body that help us to do things, or helps the body to make different process, to modulate different processes. So by creating different shapes, you can change the way that these things work. So the active part of of a peptide might have a particular shape, but if you add certain amino acids to it, you can change it such that you can take that shape and make it only act in a certain area. So this is what they've done through experimentation with these peptides. And so people are using them. They're experimental chemicals because they've not been approved for mainstream use. But people can, just as you can access anything on the internet, people can get them. So now, because people know that various peptides do different things, they can access them and they can use them. Now, having said all of that, certainly they have some effects, but again, it's experimental. They're unregulated. We're not exactly sure how well they work or what the appropriate dosages are. And always keep in mind, you have to think about this when you think about your buddy at the gym. Placebo effect, 30% effective, right? Meaning if I gave him a container and a syringe and it was freaking sugar water, and I said to him, this is BPC 157, you're going to take it and it's going to work. Even though it's sugar water and it has no effect, if I gave it to 10 people, 30% or 3 people would say they would get better. They would just get better because placebo effect, your brain's ability to influence how things are going in your body or occurring, or at least your perception of how they're going, is 30% effective. So it could have no medicinal effects whatsoever, but still 30% of the people are going to think it's effective. So, peptides, again, I think there potentially could be a benefit to these compounds, but we don't have enough research, and I don't feel like being a guinea pig myself. So,
well said. Well, I will make sure my friend from the gym does not watch this podcast. We don't want to ruin his illusion.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Chris, thank you for this wisdom. The way you just described that whole process of the DNA, the RNA, the ribosome, printing out the sequence of the protein. I mean, I was trying to visually make that into a drawing, and boy, was that complicated. So but you just explained it beautifully. So, you have a real talent for communicating this stuff, and clearly it's resonating with millions of people. You should be hitting
Not
1 million
millions,
subs.
yeah, not millions. Well, no,
Close.
Sure. We're getting close. But
When did you start your channel?
I think I started about 7 years ago.
You'll be there. Yeah. You'll hit it really soon.
I'm hoping 2025. That's my goal.
I mean, you're covering the topics that are really hard to not click on. Like if I saw a video about pink cocaine, I think I would have to click on it, So you're doing a great job of just going through the internet and finding these trends that are happening and then explaining it in a way where we get some good education about it, rather than just these forums where people are saying all sorts of nonsense.
Well, this is the thing, man. It's all about education, and at the end of the day, I just want people to be smarter. I want people to make better decisions about themselves and their lives, decisions that are going to help to optimize their experience in this journey. And to do that, we need to give people accurate information. And so, I don't know everything, and I'm not the smartest person, but I do know some things. I've had, almost 17 years of post-secondary education, and and I've seen thousands of patients. And between those two things, that's given me some insight that I think may be valuable to some people. And hopefully I can help people to learn about themselves and the world around them. And hopefully I can help them to make better decisions so that they can have a more enjoyable journey.
I love that. And I love our collaboration. It's going to be big.
Yes, man. As I said, I'm really excited to see it. And, hopefully it will go over well, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, I feel so blessed because I'm in this nice position where if I want to learn about something, I can just reach out to the top expert on it. I'm like, I want to learn about steroids. I just type in Google, I start watching your videos, and then I reach out to you, and then we get to do this collab. So we live in a good time. I'm very optimistic.
For sure we do.
Anyways, this has been a great conversation with Dr. Chris. We check out our collaboration, check out his channel. I'll include all the links in the description. And thank you so much for taking the time, and I really appreciate you.
Not a problem at all. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the invitation to collab, and I'm really excited and looking forward to it. And hopefully your viewers will enjoy it.
Hopefully we can do another.
Yes, man. I'm down to do it anytime.